Sophie, thank you so much for this amazing presentation. And
Pleasure.
we've had some questions already in the chat room. Maybe we can go back to them and address them. What do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. So we had one. Do you have a preference?
Oh, I'm happy either way. I'm happy either way. But I was going to say, if people just want to, unmute themselves and ask a question, I'm more than happy with that as well.
Yes. So to do so, please raise your hand, and then you will be able to join
Brilliant.
us. Exactly. So
Brilliant.
if you have any questions, comments, opinions, reflection, please.
Because guys, if you don't, I do. I
love
really do.
listening to you, Sophie, so that will be great. Yes.
I was going to ask, because I think at some point somebody said, oh, but it's really nerve-wracking to teach beginners. I was going to ask if anybody else felt that way. Are there people out there who think beginners, yeah, but oh, it's a bit scary. I know I certainly felt that way for a long time.
Yeah. Is there anyone who would like to answer that question and share?
I think, Gabby, that's a really, really good point. The idea of switching, and I think depending on where you're based around the world, I think in some parts of the world, your timetable can be really like crazy varied. So you can teach beginners, then you can teach, a business English class, and you can teach young learners. And it's, it always takes a few minutes, doesn't it, to just adjust, I think Katya's raised her hand. Katya, if you want to unmute yourself. Hi, Katya.
Hello. Here is morning. Hello. I'm Katya. I'm from Panama City. And I really I was very interested in your presentation because I have been teaching beginners for many years. It's really challenging. And that's why I wanted to have like more hints, new techniques, also to confirm the ones that I'm doing with my students. And now I'm teaching university students. They're all A2, A1, the majority of them. And it's challenging. It's not easy, but they really need, because it's we're all beginners at a certain point, so we really need to. I would like to give them more useful. I would like to use more useful techniques in order to help them to get more confidence, because they are so afraid to speak. I really need to use also more Spanish sometimes in order for them, because when you were talking about setting tasks, it's true, and because I try also making gestures, my body language in order for them to understand me, but also with virtual classes, it's not so easy as before.
Absolutely.
I really want to thank you, because you have given me, you have confirmed me some things that I was doing. I thought, oh well, I was doing well. Because for me, one of the difficult things is feedback. How could I get them the feedback they need? Because correction is important, but also they also needs like some kind of that you have to stop and tell them, okay, but you better do this, or maybe you need more vocabulary about this in order to express yourself in a better way, and this is for me is the thing that I'm having more difficulties now in my classes, is giving feedback. So if you can just tell me something about it, or a suggestion that you would have.
Sure. I mean, no problem. Thank you very much, Katya. I can relate. And I think whenever you teach that particular age group, you said you teach university level students.
Yes.
So I'm thinking like 17, 18, 19.
Yes, yes,
You know,
yes.
I think people are very self-conscious, you know, at that stage, you know,
Yes,
because you know there's a lot of, you know, competition, and you want to look good, you want to seem you want to look your best. I think correction is really important, of course, and I think, as you said, you know, you have to be quite selective, because obviously elementary beginners levels will make loads of mistakes. So my first tip, I think, in life generally, but correction in particular, is to pick your battles, right? So let's say with my beginners elementary level students, you know, I might highlight the third person S a couple of times, but there'll also be times where I'll just let it slide. Because I think, you know yourself, it's never just language. It's about your confidence. You know, the way you learn the language is how you feel about yourself. And if you feel like, you know, you feel confident, you feel like there's a good connection with your teacher, you feel like this is a space where it's okay to make mistakes, then I think they're more likely to take risks. I always say to my students, even with the much higher level ones, I said, look, you know, you need to rethink about mistakes. Every class you go to, you're told mistakes are bad. These are the questions, the answers are at the back of the book. Don't look, it's cheating. And if you work with somebody, it's not collaboration, it's cheating. Right? And I said, you know, to learn a language, it's different. So if you don't make mistakes, you're not trying hard enough. As simple as that. So, you know, because you have to take risks. And as a language learner, if you take risks, then you can hypothesize about the language, and you'll be able to you know, understand it a lot better.
Yes.
Right. So I think I always say to my students, you know, I haven't heard you make a mistake today. I'm not happy. You're not trying. Come on. Because especially with the lower levels, if they don't make mistakes, I mean, they're not speaking.
Yes.
Right.
Yes,
And I always said, look, communication is first. Communication's always going to be first. Always. I mean, sure, we have our students coming to Belfast, and I always say to them, try to listen really, really carefully, and listen, because people here, native speakers, make mistakes. Right. And one thing that students always say is, oh, I heard somebody said, and I says, and I goes. They use the third person S for the first person. Yeah, they do. Is it correct? No. Native speakers make mistakes. So the first thing I think is just to establish that atmosphere of, you know, mistakes. It's not that they're just okay, they're necessary. You know, so I think that's quite useful. I think in terms of feedback, I don't know how many students you have. I think sometimes the idea of, if you've got that luxury of time and space, a one-to-one tutorial is useful. Let's say maybe once a term, just to sit down one-to-one and actually find out what's going on with that student. Say, look, how are you feeling about your progress? What do you think you've got better at? What do you think you need to keep working on? So I think sometimes that one-to-one is when you really get to understand what's going on with a student. So you might think somebody's a bit defensive, maybe they're not engaged. And actually they're one-to-one, you'll realize, well, actually they're really shy. They've been bullied, or, you know, somebody's made fun of them. And I think if you can have that luxury of, you know, one-to-one interaction, I think it's really useful. Again, another thing I do with my lower level, especially with the slightly older students, like, you know, the, you know, kind of late teens, I don't really set homework, but we do daily emails. So it's just going to be like a quick email. So how's it going? You know, best film you've seen lately? What video games are you playing at the moment? Just so that I get that little bit of one-to-one, because I think they've done gap fills, you know, but I'm more interested in them getting a bit of a connection with me and using the language that they really want to use. So I like the idea of emails, back and forth, tutorials when possible, and just creating that space where, look, mistakes, it's not that we're going to tolerate them, is we need them. So if you don't make any mistakes, you're not trying hard enough.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much. Great.
Pleasure.
Yes.
No problem.
Yes. Thank you so much.
No problem.
I'm very happy also to teach beginners, because they really need English here. And for me, it's something so important to give them the tools they need in order to improve in the language.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I don't know if you guys agree, but I think my personal preference is I think teaching beginners is the most rewarding level to teach. I don't know, is that controversial? How do you know? Do you agree?
I agree, totally agree. It's the progress that they can make is just miraculous, fantastic.
Right.
I cannot get bored to that feeling of success with them. And, you know, they come to you not being able to even introduce themselves. And,
Yes.
and then they start, you know, just chatting. So it's beautiful to see for me. I just love this. I love this. So
Yes.
I agree. I agree. Thanks for that, Katya. I was just checking the chat there, and I think Gabby dropped the bomb, the L1 bomb. Didn't you, Gabby? You said, how about the use of L1? Right? This is the big hot potato, isn't it? Now, I don't expect everybody to agree on this, right? I'm trying to hedge. But but for me, in my practice in the last maybe 5 years has changed a lot. And it's changed because of the idea of using home languages. So in the last 5 years, I've started to read more about translanguaging, multilingualism, plurilingualism. The way I was trained, and I don't know about you guys, but when I went through my teacher training, and even when I started teaching, we still had the English only signs in the classrooms, you know, and translation was not allowed. Look, I think, like everything, I think there'll be pros and cons. But in my own practice, that's completely changed. So now, you know, I call my class is not the English class, it's called the Multilingual Center. Because I just find that, also because I teach pre-A1s. Most of the students I teach are really, they're mostly pre-A1. And I find that I can't see them as blank slates. And one thing I've noticed is whenever my policy was English only, I looked at them as having no language because they were beginners, and I felt, oh, you know, they're lacking. So the way I thought about them was more from a kind of a deficit perspective. Now that I use their home languages quite a lot, it's more to focus on the language they've got and the language that they want to be able to use in English. So now, you know, so again, I mean, I'm not going to, you know, if you're, you know, it's English only, I'm not going to convert you to using different languages. And I think you have to be comfortable with your own techniques, you know. But I know for me, that's something that's really changed in the last few years. And now I use L1. And most of my students speak Arabic, Slovak, Polish, Czech, Chinese, Thai. I'm obviously not fluent in any of these languages, but I find that me trying, you know, me asking, okay, so, you know, give me 5 fruits in Arabic. Okay, can you figure out with the Slovak girl how to say them in Slovak? Somehow I find that it's helped me engage my students better. But that's maybe because they speak different languages as well. I don't know, but now what I love is the fact that they all greet each other in their respective mother tongue. So when the girl from Sudan walks into the class, the Slovak girl goes, marhaba, right? And she replies, ahoy, which I think is her, because obviously they're all there to learn English, but we use the home languages a lot more. And I let them use translators at specific stages of the lesson. But it's something that I keep reading about and something that I keep learning about myself. So that's my CPDs at the moment. Everything is about plurilingualism, multilingualism, translanguaging. So
I agree. I think it's important to be a little bit flexible. It cannot be just either black or white. So it's, yeah, depending on the students.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So
I agree, Gabby. I think, and it's something that I think is really important. And whenever I start a new year or whenever I get a new group, I always do the sentence prompts, and I always, you know, I think a good student, ... I think a good teacher, ... As a student, I want my teacher to ... because we have, you know, we've got to work with their beliefs and their expectations, right? So I always ask them. Now I say, okay, do you want to use Arabic? But one thing I've started doing as well is asking them about their home language. Said, you know, do you read in Arabic? Are you a confident reader in Arabic? And I found out that actually, you know, we make a lot of assumptions. Some of my students are not that literate in their home language. You know, some of the Arabic students are very literate in their home language. Some of the Slovak students are not. You can't make any assumptions about the students, but I find that actually at least showing more of it, for me to show more of an interest in their home languages helps me gauge who they are, where they're at, and what their needs are. But Gabby, I wouldn't go against, you know, students. If students tell me, look, it's English only because that's what we want, I'm not there. I'm not there to start a revolution. I'm French, but come on. So I agree. I think we have to work with what the students believe is useful and what they expect they'll be doing in the classroom, especially when they're adult learners, I think. I don't know. I haven't checked everything in the chat.
So we have been talking about the challenges that we may have when it comes to teaching lower level students, beginners, but what about higher level ones? So what are the challenges? Are there any challenges? You know?
I think so. I think teaching, well, I think the first challenge when you're teaching higher level students is the quality of the language you're going to be teaching them, right? So, you know, teaching the present continuous to elementary level students, you know, in terms of your language analysis, it's definitely not as challenging as, okay, so today I'm going to be teaching them mixed conditionals. Okay, how do they work? Right? So I think if you feel that you've got a really good grasp of language awareness and your grammar is amazing, then I think you'll be okay. But, and again, I think for native speakers, that's a real challenge, right? Because as a native speaker, you use the language, but you don't always know why. But whenever you teach your B2 and above, they'll be asking, but why does it work that way? You know? So I think being able to clarify language is harder with higher level students. But I've noticed another thing as well. I think when you teach higher level students, you're going to be asked questions that you don't necessarily have the answer to. And I think as a teacher, you know, you may have mixed feelings about this, right? Because you're going to be asked questions. What do you do if you don't know? Right? I think we've got it in our heads that, but you know, I'm the teacher, I have to be able to answer all their questions. And inevitably there'll be a day where somebody's going to ask a question. I remember I was asking, when do you say it was great seeing you and it was great to see you? And I was like, oh my God. That was during my CELTA course, and I was like, I can't do this job. Because it's really challenging. And I think it's about having, again, that honest relationship with your students that, you know what, it's a really good question. I've never thought about it that way. Okay, make a note. That's my homework. You know, I don't think our students expect us to have the answer to everything or, you know, to be walking dictionaries either. But I think we need to be okay with that as well. So I think these are the main challenges. Do you know what? I think maybe in terms of attitude, sometimes it can be more challenging because see, if you teach, do you know the way, you know, you were saying, Hedy, you know, you love teaching beginners because they make progress so fast, and they do. And see, when you get to B1 and you get to that plateau,
Exactly.
right? And students really want to move up, but they're just not ready yet and they start to lose motivation. That's a challenge, I think, for the teacher, because you need to keep them, you know, interested and engaged, and they're kind of going like, what's the point? So I think motivation can be a bit of a challenge as well.
I agree. And I can see that Isayvani is raising her hand, so let her talk. Or
Hi, my question to you is regarding choosing not to correct all the time, so to avoid discouraging them. I've had a situation where students have intervened when I didn't. Now, how do I avoid the situation of appearing unprofessional? Do I need to explain to them in advance that I may not correct all their mistakes to avoid this type of bad impression?
I think that's a really good question. I think you may have the answer to it. I would say definitely, I think I would just tell them, but also tell them why. Say, look, you know, I will not correct every single one of your mistakes. Do you know why? And maybe elicit from them and say, because our objective right now is to get you to communicate more. But let them know that you are listening and you are making a note of their mistakes. And tell them, look, if I don't correct you, if I don't correct somebody right now, it's not that I haven't noticed. It's not that I haven't heard their mistake. I've heard it. I may have made a note of it, but I will deal with it later. Because for now, for me, the objective is for you to communicate. I always tell them, you know, this is fluency time, this is accuracy time.
Okay.
If it's fluency, I say, okay, guys, speak. Are you going to make mistakes? Of course you are. Is that okay? Yes. Will I correct you later? Yes. But I agree. I've had that situation as well. Students will start to correct one another.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, I think as long as it remains fairly balanced, I tend to let them. But if I see that it discourages one of the learners, I'll say, look, guys, remember, we'll do the corrections later.
Okay.
So I haven't heard enough mistakes yet. Not everybody's made mistakes. So I need to wait for more. And then we'll work on our accuracy later.
Okay.
If accuracy is too hard, I say, no, we'll work on our grammar later. We'll work on our good grammar later. But I think it's that bit of signposting. So, okay, guys, now I need you to practice. Now it's communication time. But okay. I think it's absolutely fine to just be straight with them, you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
We also have a question from Maria, and I'm just asking her to unmute herself and voice the question.
Okay. Hi, Sophie.
Hi, Maria.
Lovely to to be here with you. Well, my question is just, perhaps I haven't formulated it properly, but probably well. It's just that I've come across, I mean, in the past, say, 3-4 years, that I mean, in those mixed classes with the Spanish students, German students, French students, Italian students, due to the fact that languages are implemented in Europe. Sorry if there is an interference. I've got the planes flying over for the background. I mean, I'm just going to close the window. Oh dear, the sound.
I can still hear you, Maria.
Then it's just, sorry. We've got the Battle of Britain. And the you know, red arrows are flying over and the noises may be interfering. Sorry about that.
No worries.
So my question is, well, or just is the scenario is something which it fascinates me, because all those students, mainly from Italy, France, Spain, up to one extent the German ones, because they are learning, for example, perhaps Spanish or German or French as another extra language, when they get into the class, I mean, you always have the more advanced student that perhaps is pairing with a German student, or with a Spanish student, or with an Italian student or French. And what they do is just, you are doing something, or you're going through the vocabulary, or you're giving instructions, and some of the students don't get it straight away. And there is the French student, or the German student, or the Italian or the Spanish student helping the other student in their own language. And I think, well, I never say anything, you let them get on with it. But it really fascinates me. And then I was wondering whether you have ever come across a scenario like that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, oh yeah, no, definitely. And do you know what, Maria, that I don't know if there's a right and a wrong answer as such, but for me, it's always, I always go back to my stage aim, right? If I think, right, the aim of this activity is for them to practice the language we've just learned, then I let them help each other so that they can spend more time on the task. Right. So sometimes I think, do you know what? It's, if somebody didn't understand and their friend can help them, I let them do it, because then they can get on with the task a bit quicker.
Yeah.
But what I'll do as well is then I'll think, do you know what? Here's the note. They don't understand that language, but they may hear that in other classes. So at some point I'm going to have to do lessons on the language of instructions. Right. So I find that at times I'll do quick lessons, especially with the lower level learners, you know, on, you know, a vocab lesson on match, cross out, underline, cross the odd one out, just so that I find that sometimes they don't get the language. Sometimes they're just not familiar with the task type. Right. Yeah. And I mean, I had that experience yesterday where I realized that my student, she couldn't do a matching task. It was match the question and the answers, because she could not get her head around the fact that the answers were not true for herself. They were just from a book. Couldn't. Oh. You know, but actually I was, because at first I was like, well, she doesn't understand match. But then I was like, no, she completely gets it. She just, it's more like cognitive in a way. She's just not getting the concept. So I think for me, it's just, you know, if you, again, it's about picking your battles. If you want to get on with your task, I will, you know, I would keep on letting them help one another, but make a note. What seems to be the issue? Do you think it's the language used during the instruction, during the task setup, or is it the task type that they're just not really familiar with? And they imagine a bit of learner training. What do you think?
Well, it's that happens mainly when they are working in a team of 3 or 4 students. You just put them in groups, and that's when it happens, when things, you know, when this kind of a scenario takes place. And I try not to interfere too much, because as you've said, they're getting on with the task, and then what I've been observing is that when the lessons finish and they go out, they tend to mix again, because they do want to learn the other languages. I mean, it only, I mean, this scenario only happens, and also I have to say, with the, you know, 14, 15, 16s, the flirting. So there is always a bit of flirting, and there will be always the boy who just likes the girl. And I think
to be young, Maria.
Yeah, so I think only in this scenario. It doesn't happen with the more mature students. That doesn't happen. I mean, 17 or 18s are just beyond that stage.
They're too mature.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, Maria, what about demos? Does it help if you do demos for, like, you know, if you're going to have a, let's say, a speaking activity that takes place in a group? Does it help if you do like a negative demo first, and let's say from, so why was this not good enough? How can we make it better? Does that help?
Well, yes, it does, because you just throw, you know, give them something and they do spot it straight away. No, that's not right. And then within the group, they have to just work it out together. So it does work like that, because they do need the demos. They do need them. And of course, I wouldn't say, you know, you have to do demos constantly. I mean, as soon as they learn, as soon as they know the basics, they spot it straight away.
And I still think it's great that they are resourceful and they will help one another.
Well, they are.
I think that's absolutely, because to me, that's what language learning is about, isn't it? It's about being resourceful, using what you've got, as opposed to focusing on what you don't have yet.
Yeah, and also what I do love and I like is seeing these young people willing to cooperate, to work together with other nationalities. And sometimes, you know, there are differences regarding football and sport. There are always those
but you know, they're still helping each other. Maria, I'd say don't rock the boat.
Yeah, I love it. I let them get on with it. Yeah, it's fantastic.
I think, you know, but I think it's always interesting when students don't get on with a task and they need help from another student to find out what's the obstacle. Is it the language? Is it the task? Is it the content?
You know? Well, I would say that sometimes there are cultural interferences, perhaps, or misunderstood cultural idiosyncrasies.
Interesting. Very interesting.
But it depends also on the maturity of the student, how exposed that student has been to, I mean, sometimes we get students from some parts of France that I would say they are more rural, perhaps more isolated. With I would say with French students, because they come from areas in France that happen to be a little bit more isolated from the cosmopolitan cities.
But then it's great that they still come and they make connections and they use the
Yes.
language to as a bridge to communicate between people. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. So again, I don't think there's a general rule of thumb when it comes to using L1 or nothing. It's something you do at your own discretion. But I think as a teacher, I think it's really interesting to start reading more about it. Here's an idea for another gallery teachers masterclass.
Indeed.
You know, the use of L1, you know, in the classroom. But I think it's a fascinating area of study, and there's loads of articles and webinars taking place. So definitely loads out there. Thanks for that, Maria.
Thanks a lot to you. Thank you ever so much. I just wanted to add that I was one of those teachers that I would never allow any other languages spoken in the classroom but English.
That's how we were trained.
That was, quite a few years ago now.
Absolutely.
So much,
Pleasure.
Sophie. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think this brings us to the end of today's masterclass. Time flies super fast, I think. So Sophie, thank you ever so much for your beautiful input session.
I'm delighted.
All these questions.